Welcome into the Skol Purple podcast. We're reacting to the Vikings third round selection. Carson here, along with Daniel, as Daniel joined us for our big live stream on Thursday night. Over 4.5, or right around 4.5 hour live stream we had the other night. A lot of fun. It was a long night, but it was a lot of fun. And it was a long night again, Daniel, this time for a different reason, because the Vikings didn't pick until the final pick of the third round because they traded back. As you can see, for those of you watching here on YouTube, Vikings traded back with the San Francisco 49ers. And the trade, it could go both ways. Some trade charts don't like the trade for the Vikings. Some trade charts do. I think the Vikings just wanted to get more picks.
Yeah.
It was pretty obvious. And they
go through
probably
the details
thought, yeah, let's do that. I'll pull that up here. I think
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing was the Vikings also probably felt like they had a lot of value still on the board, like where they didn't feel like there was anybody that was on the board from their perspective. I'm not saying from my perspective or anybody else's, but from their perspective, that was worth, okay, we need to take this player instead of, okay, let's try and trade back. So the Vikings ended up getting the 102, the 164, which is a fifth round pick, and 222, which is a seventh round pick. So they get two extra selections. I'm not big on the seventh round pick, even though we know Rick Spielman was great with those. And apparently Kwesi's becoming well adept with them as well now. But I'm not necessarily thrilled with the seventh round, but the extra fifth round could be interesting. And who knows? Maybe a seventh rounder could be Brock Purdy. You never know. But I do think that it was a good idea to trade back. Maybe they could have got a little more value, but it's kind of split depending on which trade chart you look at. And obviously, the most important trade chart is Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah's trade chart. So there you go. But Daniel, go ahead and give us your thoughts on the trade back first before we talk about Mekhi Blackmon.
Well, his may be the most important as far as in the eyes if he makes the decisions, but it also is he's got to go with what he feels because it's his career on the line. So he's the one that everything sticks with him. First off, cheers to Vikes fans. We got the pick. We got a pick anyway. I was afraid as soon as we traded back, before I saw the details come out, I was thinking we're not even going to see a pick today. Like we not only we already knew we didn't get round 2. I was thinking, well, now we might not even see round 3. Like you said, their ultimate goal was to amass picks because we only had 4 coming into it, and we needed a roster to fill. We have a lot of holes on this team. How can we get more picks to just fill the roster outside of obviously free agency coming up, and there's going to be some big time signings there around the league. The Vikes still in a cap kind of predicament. We don't have a lot of money to spend there, so the draft is the best way to fill your roster without having to spend money. Now we do finally get to see the pick in the final pick of round 3, and we get the corner. This is something that Tony and I talked about last night. We wanted us to go defense. We finally go defense in the draft, deep defensive back class that we have this year, like you kept mentioning. We took a guy I wasn't expecting, considering Ringo was still there. I actually thought that's how we were going to go. But, we get a guy that might have a little more all-around coverage, like you said. Ringo was a bit of a risk taker, but he had a great defense around him that kind of could cushion that, allowed him to have that freedom, whereas the Vikes aren't built for that. So maybe that's why they chose Blackmon. He's maybe a little bit better all-around corner. I'm not going to pretend like I know a ton about the guy, but you know what? The Vikes got a defensive player. I'm happy with that. And like I say, we got a couple more picks out of the deal. It's not the sexy move. We're used to Rick Spielman running and gunning and firing back into the first round, but, this team just didn't have that kind of capital this year. So whatever, we got a defensive player. So far, I'm happy. I'm still excited for tomorrow, even though late round picks aren't super exciting. I'm still excited.
Well, I'm going to read you here momentarily some thoughts from Lance Zierlein, and not Greg Zierlein, not Legatron, as Daniel thought I was talking about Legatron before we started this. But yeah, I don't mind the pick. I think there was other corners available that were maybe more, at least consensus-wise, better to take in this spot, but let's hear what Lance Zierlein has to say. I'm going to tell you everything he has to say, and then I'm going to tell you which round he thought that he would go in, and then you might have something to say. So Lance Zierlein says this is on NFL.com/prospects. Zierlein says that Mekhi Blackmon is an aggressive man cover cornerback whose physical play brings both passes defensed and penalties. Sound familiar? Blackmon gives receivers a rough ride over the first 5 yards, but his extended grabbing will be less tolerated by NFL officials. He's capable of phasing routes when matching from press, but he doesn't have the hips to transition smoothly when playing off-man coverage. He's talented at squeezing the catch space and timing his challenges, but Blackmon's lack of size and fluidity could limit his pro chances. So that's interesting. That's interesting. And now Zierlein says his strengths. Experience playing outside and in the slot, so versatility, which we know Brian Flores likes.
Yep.
Also with Byron Murphy that the Vikings got.
Yep.
He fires quick, accurate strikes in opponent's chest from press. Stays in phase and squeezes tight to the route. Consistent finding position when receivers are recovering or transitioning. And he tracks and adjusts to deep throws like a receiver. Well-timed leaps help him get to the high point. However, the weaknesses: too tight-hipped to swivel freely in shadow route breaks, needs multiple gather steps to plant and go from his pedal, relies on grab and pull defense at the top of the route, could become an illegal contact machine. Big bodies will overtake him on jump balls, and below average play strength as a tackle finisher. So that is the breakdown from Lance Zierlein. And based on everything that I just told you, Daniel, where would you think Lance Zierlein projected him to go?
Yeah, I'm going to say 5th round then.
6th round pick is what he expected.
Yeah.
Or projected, I should say.
Well, and a lot of what you were mentioning there that he was saying, it doesn't make sense. Now, we have a different defensive coordinator, so a lot can change. I'm guessing that's the plan, obviously, with a different guy running the show. But, for the Vikings last year, we played a lot of zone. So to hear we drafted a guy that isn't, doing, he does well press coverage, but as soon as you get into the open field, doesn't swivel well, doesn't stay with his guy, can't shadow him. Yeah, that's kind of like but that's what zone is. So I'm hoping with that we go back to a man, which to me is the better way that our defense was fit for, because that's what we saw with Zimmer. We saw press man D. We like to be up on there. We put our cornerbacks right on bodies, and that's when we were able to create havoc, and we just had a better all-around defense. Now I know that dwindled towards the end of the years, but I still think this defense and could be built for that, especially with guys like Harrison Smith who don't like to play a lot of like zone reads. He likes to be right up into it. I'm hoping that this means we're going after guys that want to be a part of the defense, want to be man press, and that's the direction that we're going. And I hope that's kind of trending that way. That's the most positive way I can spin that, because like I say, I don't know a lot about Blackmon, so I'm going to take his word for it. And I'm hoping that's the direction the defense is going.
So Lance Zierlein does say the first few words. He says, aggressive man cover cornerback whose physical play brings both pass defense and penalties. So to speak to the pass defense, by the way, 13 passes defensed a year ago for Mekhi Blackmon. And he had, by the way, some really good grades. Let let me see if I can find. I'll have to look and see if I can find this in comparison to some of the other corners. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good for him. Now maybe Lance Zierlein differs from PFF a little bit,
Right.
but I do find that interesting. Mekhi Blackmon, USC. So he actually went against Jordan Addison in practice. 5'11", 178. And he ran a 4.47 in the 40-yard dash. So take that with what ye will. So not really a blazing fast corner, but he's okay, you know?
Yeah, well, and with those intangibles and those measurables, I should say, and like what you said, good in pass will get those passes defense, but can get penalties. I mean, it almost screams Xavier Rhodes. I mean, it screams.
Yep, that's exactly who I was thinking of.
I mean, it's a guy who's got, and he's not the same build because Xavier was what 6'2", 6'3", whatever he was. Just a bigger build. But it just sounds like it. He's not great speed, but he's good speed. He likes to play press man, but he can get lost. And if he's going to get lost, he's going to grab his jersey and try to pull him down with him. So and we got some good years out of Xavier. I mean, people really started to hate on him, but I actually really liked him during his time as a Viking. I still think he's one of the better corners we've had all the last 10 years, honestly. So I think if we could get 2, 3, 4 years out of this guy, and if he could learn at this level, I don't expect him to step up and play right away. I think Hughes, like you mentioned at the beginning of the show, is going to be a big plus to the defense. And there's a lot of people who kind of believe he's underrated as far as corners go. So I hope he steps up in a big way. And I still think we have some nice things cooking. I really hope we see a turnaround with Andrew Booth Jr., but we'll see what we have here. And I think just starting at corner, finally on the defensive side of the ball again, like I mentioned earlier, I think it's a good step in the right direction. And if we get that press man corner that can body up against, because like you said, like we talked about last night, we have Christian Watson out there. Detroit's got a good wide receiver core. Darnell Mooney over there in Chicago's a decent guy. So these are teams that we're
DJ Moore.
DJ Moore now. Yeah, exactly. We're only getting better in the division. It's slow. I don't think this division's a barn burner by any means. I mean, we're still overall pretty low division as far as overall team strength, but we have some guys that we need to compete with now in the division as far as wide receivers go, and I think this is a good step in the right direction for the Vikes.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Everybody's different with their draft boards, right? Like Lance Zierlein obviously really down on Blackmon. PFF kind of likes Blackmon. So, and I think Kwesi, we kind of know he's more analytically driven.
Exactly.
I think that's probably where the Vikings go with that. But also, Brian Flores probably had a say. I think you mentioned him earlier as well.
Yep.
And he does play more of that man coverage, and it's usually requiring physicality from the corners. And according to what we read about Mekhi Blackmon, that's exactly what he does well. Sometimes it can be penalty inducing, but I think that's the kind of guy he likes. And now it's the part that the Vikings have to try and coach that penalty part out of him, out of his game, which took a while for old Mike Zimmer to do that with Xavier Rhodes. And even though I don't even know if Rhodes actually totally got over it, but he did get it. He did get better at it throughout his career. But yeah, I don't mind the pick. I don't love it. It's kind of like the Addison pick. Like, I really do like the Addison pick. I didn't love it, but I did like it because I thought we needed a wide receiver too. I just was really hoping for JSN. So that's maybe why I didn't love the Addison pick. But everything I hear about is route running and things, the athleticism maybe a little left to be desired, those types of things. But the route running maybe is the best of the class, according to what some people say.
Yeah. I think so far, if you're 2 picks into it and you say we got a wide receiver, defensive back, people would say that's perfect. That's what we needed. If you threw in a defensive tackle, maybe, but outside of that, those are the needs that we really needed. You lose a guy like Adam Thielen, you got to replace that. And you could say, well, there's KJ Osborne. Yeah, but what's after him? Nothing. I mean, there's really nothing on the roster after that that's worth putting on the field every down, or at least on big third down situations. So it was a need that we needed. We took care of that in the first round. Now we look at the defense and you say, well, we got a hole here, 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 here. But it starts at the defensive back spot. I mean, you could look at the defensive line and say we needed to bolster that because without pressure up front, it's hard to have good defensive back play, which is 100% true. I think that's the most pivotal part of a great defense is a good defensive line. But you still need adequate pieces back there. And losing Patrick Peterson, letting Duke Shelley even walk. We lost a lot of good pieces on our defense this year, specifically in the defensive backfield, not to mention Eric Kendricks and guys like that. But, we just needed to fill needs in the backfield, and I'm glad we finally addressed it, like I mentioned. But to your point about Kwesi being more analytical, I just hope it's not an overthinking situation. You're wearing the Twins gear. When I think Twins gear and I think of Rocco Baldelli and how many times last year Twins fans were frustrated about pulling pitchers after so many innings because the analytics say this, that, and the other thing, it scares me because I'm one of those. It scared me last year. It made me mad at the Twins for losing so many games and pulling pitchers in good times when you're putting in bullpens that are crap. Is that what the Vikings are doing? Are we overthinking it to a point? Was he the right choice at this time? Like you said, if he's getting a draft grade by some people as this, a 5th rounder or a 6th rounder.
6th round, yeah.
That's pretty scary when you're taking him in the 3rd. Granted, it's the last pick in the 3rd, but it's a 3rd round draft pick. And when you only have 4 picks, now you have 6, but when you only have 4 picks coming into it, it's still a scary thing because if you're overthinking some things, you're not looking at it with an open viewpoint. Again, I liked Ringo. You heard about him. The dude was splashy. Granted, again, I said it earlier, he played on one of the best defenses in college football history. But I just think we needed a guy with a little attitude, a little spunk. I thought Ringo applied that, but if Blackmon's the fit, we got to trust Kwesi for now. And it might turn out he
and
might
Flores.
be great. And Flores, yeah. And I think that, and you mentioned that too, and I wanted to say that again. Because Brian Flores, the way Kevin O'Connell and to me how Kwesi handles their teams, they allow those defensive coordinators and they allow other people in the room to have those voices, which we didn't see with Mike Zimmer. I think, Zimmer was running the show. I mean, I know Spielman made the picks as far as that goes, but Zimmer was the one that was going to play the guys or not. Whereas Kevin O'Connell said, I guarantee you, we looked at Brian Flores and said, you come here, he's your game. You handle your defense, and him and Kwesi worked it out from there. So, yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting pick, but we'll see what they do with it.
Dakota's making her opinion known. What do you think? You like it? Yeah? I think she just wanted to get on camera just to show how pretty she is. But
exactly. I don't blame her.
That's right.
That's why I'm here.
Oh, boy. Well, before we go, apparently the Bleacher Report panel that is going on right now has given the Vikings a B for their draft pick of Blackmon. How fitting is that?
Oh.
Apparently, Blackmon actually played somewhere else before going to USC.
Yep. I think he was a JUCO transfer.
No, he was at Colorado. He was at Colorado.
Oh, that's right.
So, yep. So, then he went to USC, and so, yeah, it'll be interesting. I think, it's kind of one of those things, we've said it on this show with the quarterback situation, trust the Vikings until they prove us wrong. Trust their evaluation of quarterback until they prove us wrong. Trust their evaluation of cornerback until they prove us wrong, and in pretty much every other position. Obviously, the draft last year hasn't gone well so far, but maybe year 2 is different, Maybe those guys come back healthy, and, as the Vikings have said, which I think is a little optimistic to think quite like this, but they basically said it's like having 2 new draft classes coming in for next year, which I think is a little too optimistic. I don't think all of them are going to hit from last year, but a couple of them could, 2 to 3, maybe 4. But
Well, and to
yeah,
that question, I think it's worth looking at the positions that we drafted highly. You look at obviously Lewis Scene's season got cut short because of his leg. You look at Andrew Booth Jr., who is dealing with injuries all year long. But both defensive backs, they're guys that position isn't really expected to thrive year one. You got guys like Sauce Gardner. I mean, they're out there, but they're those top corners in the draft that they're gonna, they're just NFL ready. They're just a different kind of breed. But when you're talking about most defensive backs, I bet that year two is where that jump happens. So yeah, I still think there's a lot of positive. You look at Asamoah on the linebacker position; he's going to have huge shoes to fill in Eric Hendricks. I really think that draft class has a lot of potential, and I would agree with people. I think it's kind of like getting 2 draft classes in one, but it's still scary because of how bad the defense was last year. It still didn't help us that greatly as far as that goes.
yeah. Well, there you have it. That's our thoughts on Mekhi Blackmon, the second pick for the Vikings in the draft, and the first cornerback that they have taken since obviously last draft. But let's talk a little bit more about some positions for tomorrow. We are going to release this yet tonight. Hopefully by midnight it'll be out. But Central Time. But Daniel, what are your thoughts on positions for tomorrow? I will say this really quickly. I'm a little disappointed they didn't go up and get Hendon Hooker. I was kind of advocating for them to do that, but maybe tomorrow they go get Darian Thompson Robinson. Maybe they go get Jake Hayner. Maybe they go get one of those other guys. I would say if it's not one of those 2 guys, maybe Tanner McKee. But even then, I'm kind of like, okay, I'm not so sure on some of these other guys. But quarterback could be another one. We could still use another cornerback, maybe a kicker of the future, and obviously defensive line.
I really don't think we're going to go kicker. I think our next move is going to be D-line. I think we're going to try to get somebody to try and anchor and learn that position. If they see somebody that's a raw talent, almost like a Danielle Hunter. He was a 3rd-round pick. I remember I went to training camp that year, and I
think he was 4th round, actually.
You might be right. You might be 100% right on that. I just remember going to training camp that year, and
That
he
man
walked
is,
by.
yeah.
He walked, and it was just a physical specimen that you're like, whom is this? Like, and then you figure it out, and you're just like, wow. Like, if they could figure this guy out, and they did.
Oh, no, he was 3rd round. You're right.
Okay, thank you. I just think it's one of those things that if they see something in somebody as far as the defensive tackle talent or defensive end talent, I think they're going to take a chance on somebody that they can kind of groom to be that next Danielle Hunter or to try and fill in the shoes of a Dalvin Tomlinson, because we have needs on that position as well. So I think that's where they're going to go. I don't foresee them being able to really trade up. Like you mentioned yesterday, we just don't have capital. So to trade up to try and get a defensive tackle plus a quarterback in maybe the next round, if we wanted to get a DTR kind of guy, I think it's going to be kind of tough. But I'm on board with you. To me, if we get a defensive tackle first and then we try to go with quarterback as a flyer, give a guy a chance, see what can happen, I'm all on board with it. So I'm excited for tomorrow just to see how we fill out the remaining picks that we have. I still think defense is a great need that we should fill, and that's going to be my guess. I think D tackle is the next position we go after, or defensive line in general, I should say.
Well, and it'll be interesting to see how much capital for next year the Vikings would potentially move up.
True.
Because they do know, or they may know, that they are getting rid of Dalvin Cook potentially, or that they're getting rid of Zadarius Smith, or both.
Do you think that'll happen tomorrow?
I don't know. But with that in mind, maybe they know that they can get this pick for that player. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here, but
I'm
and
just
then
thinking
they
in 4, 5, 6 round. I think both of those guys are too talented for that round unless they went after capital plus next year. You know what I mean? They went,
right.
we want your fourth plus we want next year's third. I just think these guys
Yeah.
are both too talented to make a day 3 trade, and it's pretty rare that you see players traded on day 3. But
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to the idea if we get futures on top of that. I just,
Right.
it's just so rare. I think if the Vikings were going to make a splash as far as those players go, I was expecting it yesterday, at the latest probably today. It would be fun tomorrow, but like say, I'd need a future, man. If they traded a Zadarius Smith for a fourth round pick tomorrow, and that's it, I think they got robbed.
Yeah, I mean, but at the same time, if he's not going to play for you, then it's like, well, you might as well get something.
And I'm on board with that because, like I mentioned yesterday, you were part of that conversation. Obviously, that I don't. It doesn't seem like he wants to be here. I really would.
Yeah.
I'm interested to know why. Because at the beginning of the year, it seemed like he was like, "Bleep the Packers. I'm all purple. I want to be here. I'm here to win." And then what? 8 weeks into it, it just tanked. I mean, not
Yep.
only his gameplay, but his attitude. The season got over. He scrubbed
Injuries.
his social. Yeah, injury. But why would an injury make you scrub your social accounts of all your Viking stuff? I
Yeah.
want to know what happened in that room or in that facility or wherever it happened. What went on?
Kirk
Because
O'Chain's got to him, man.
yeah, he seemed like such a lovable guy, and I was all on board with Zadarius just leading our defense with that attitude that he had. Him and Patrick Peterson just kind of taking the team and running with it, and then he just disappeared. And now I'm scared of that. So yeah, you're absolutely right. If he's a guy that's basically hinting he doesn't want to be here, he'd be that cancer in the locker room, quote unquote. You got to get rid of him, and if you're going to get something, that's better than nothing. So I would agree with that point.
And I will say linebacker would be another position I'd like to see them address. I don't think Jordan Hicks is coming back after this year. And
Right.
I am not 100% sold on Samoa.
No.
I think he could be an okay starter, but I don't know if I'm ready to say, yes, he's the next really good inside linebacker. And we
Right.
know how badly that cost the Vikings defense a year ago. People took advantage of how bad the Vikings linebackers were in coverage, Kendricks and Hicks. And now I know people will say, well, it's not fair to Kendricks or Hicks for being put into that situation, but that's part of the defense that they were
But
playing. And
yeah, that they were
that's
playing.
what a 3-4 is.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
And I agree with you. And Kendricks he's a 4-3 guy.
Yep.
He's supposed to be a middle linebacker that gets to kind of just read the quarterback and decide what he's going to do, if he's dropping back into zone or if he's going to come up and play the run. He last year threw him for a complete loop because we as Vikings fans know how good he was all the time in pass coverage his first however many years before last season. The dude could play anywhere on the field from that middle linebacker role, but last year he looked completely lost, and I don't think that was his fault. I think it was just kind of the defensive scheme. Jordan Hicks, I thought, played pretty well because he came from that system. He knew what a 3-4 was versus that 4-3. But you're right. I don't think Asamoah is the long-term replacement. I don't think we have that guy on roster. We don't, which is weird for a Viking because we've had pretty good linebacker play for a long time. We had Chad Greenway into EJ Henderson, into Aaron Henderson, into going straight into Eric Kendricks and Anthony Barr. We've never really been lacking linebacker, and here we are with kind of like you said, if Jordan Hicks leaves, we're caught with our pants down next year because, man, there's not a whole lot coming up through the farm system right now.
Yeah, the linebacker core, even though it's maybe never been elite for the Vikings, it's always been really solid.
Yes.
And
Good point.
now the last year, it wasn't as good anymore. But the thing I had mentioned previously in some episodes too, Eric Kendricks, the last year of Mike Zimmer, and now maybe this is partly Mike Zimmer too, but the last year of Mike Zimmer's defense, Eric Kendricks had his numbers drop already that year. So
Yeah.
at least according to what PFF had graded on him. But I think Kendrick started to disintegrate a little bit, and it's unfortunate because, like you said, he was really good for several years, but it's just the way it is. And this is the unfortunate part when your GM doesn't find out about these players being deteriorating until it's too late, and then nobody wants them. It's like,
Yep.
well, I guess you can't trade them now because nobody wants them now.
Right.
Um, which is why I think it's important for, like, even especially like at a running back spot, like a couple of years ago when Dalvin had his best year, trade him,
Yeah.
trade him at the height of his value. But
Yeah. And that's why they were in such a tough predicament. Yeah, he was at the height of his value, but you're looking at at the trade deadline, what were we? 8-2 or whatever, 8-3.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's tough to trade away your star running back at that time. So you're kind of put in a tough spot. And even now, you look at we won 13 games last year. We're in a very winnable division. Why would you get rid of your best running back? Even though if you're outside of the organization. If you're inside of the organization, be like, we got Alexander Madison here. We got a guy who can play a similar role because the running back position just doesn't get the ball a lot. So we can look at intangibles differently as Vikings fans who follow the team a lot more than outsiders. So we got to listen to ourselves and be within ourselves. And I think that's where we just have to look at guys like Kendricks and be like, the defense is bad, but he's been one of our best players over the last so many years. You can't get rid of a guy at that point. Although he's likely going to walk at the end of this year. If we let him walk now, we're really going to see the paint come off the walls. Like, it's just going to be really bad really quick, even though the defense was really bad the whole season. So we have a bright future, but it still doesn't seem like years past when there's a lot of, if you were 13-3 going into the next year, not losing as many players as we have, you say this is going to be it. We add these guys, it's going to be good. This team just doesn't have that feel. I mean, we got lucky on a few games last year. We have a lot of holes to fill. I'm not even going to try to say that I think we have a chance at the Super Bowl next year unless we hit free agency real hard somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this team's a couple of years away, at least. There's just not enough talent at the cornerback position unless Byron Murphy emerges immediately and some of the younger guys like Booth and Evans really come out next year. I just don't see the defense improving enough. As good as Brian Flores is as a defensive coordinator, I don't even know if he can make the defense good enough to put us in that position to be a Super Bowl contender. And I also think the interior offensive line still is going to cause problems for the Vikings when they get to the postseason.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I think I'm guessing the ownership and the coaching staff and Kwesi and everybody kind of talk. This is going to be a build because they knew they had success. And you talked about this last night, I think it was. Rick Spielman always played with a win now mentality, which always semi put the Vikings behind the 8 ball because they had to play with an aging roster, with an expensive roster that didn't allow you a lot of flexibility because you never went young. You were always signing older vets that required more money. You were paying your vets that required more money. You never went with younger talent. Whereas these guys, I think, are reloading versus rebuilding. So they're not completely letting the wheels fall off before they started over, but we're letting these veteran players go. Eric Kendricks, Adam Thielen, Patrick Peterson. We're letting these big money players go, and we're replacing them with younger guys in hopes that they can just kind of slowly build this thing into a championship style roster. It's going to take a little time. It's just what's going to wait out. Is the ownership going to wait out? Is the fan base going to wait out before they start wanting O'Connell's head or Kwesi's head? Or are we going to try and see what they're actually trying to build here?
Yep. Be patient. Be patient. That's I'm sure what the front office would want you to hear and want you to believe. And I'm of that philosophy too, because it's going to be very interesting to see what the Vikings do at quarterback, and we will talk more about that as this weekend goes on. I think we're also hoping to do a Fan Express line live on Sunday afternoon on our YouTube channel here. So if you are able to join us for that, go ahead and do that as well. And we'll probably talk more about the draft. And if the Vikings didn't draft a quarterback, that could be a very interesting topic going into the rest of this offseason and especially into 2024.
I'm going to tell you, I'm going to say don't be surprised. I'm still in the mindset.
Caleb Williams?
No, I'm saying don't be surprised. I don't think we see a pick in the quarterback position. I think this team, and this is what I said last night, I think this team is going to wait, hold their cards, and build for next year's draft. We have a pretty good quarterback class next year. I think we're going to try to fill roster. I think we're going to see D tackle tomorrow. I think we're going to see maybe linebacker or offensive lineman. And I think we're going to, fill in the rest from there. Now, we might take a late, a seventh round quarterback, whatever, flyer guy. But I think next year, that's when they're going to attack the quarterback position. I really, truly believe that. So if we do get to tomorrow afternoon, and I'm not sure if I'd be able to make it or not, I'll try. But I'm just saying, I think, don't be surprised if we don't get a quarterback. That's where I'm going to sit on that take. I think people might be upset with that, but I just get that feeling that this is where the regime is going. If they didn't move up today to get a Hendon Hooker, I just don't think they're going quarterback.
And the question for me now would be to you.
Yep.
Do they re-sign Kirk Cousins one more time for one more year if they don't get their quarterback until next year?
But he's not on a one-year deal. We have him, 2 more years, I think?
No, this is it. The only other years that are on his deal are void years. So this is it. So, yep, this is because they didn't extend him again this offseason. All they did is converted part of his salary into a bonus and put some of it into a couple of years down the road.
Yep. Oh, so they're completely void. I was thinking they were unrestricted, so he could test the market. I thought that's how.
Nope, completely void. So he is likely gone unless the Vikings say, let's bring him back. Let's bring him back one more year.
And maybe that's the draw. And maybe that's what the Vikings are going to say. They're going to say, if we can win this division, we're going to roll with them again. We'll pay him halfway through the year. It doesn't matter when you sign the guy. You could pay him whenever. So I think if they're saying we're at week 6 and we're 6-0 or we're 5-1, we re-sign him. We get another year. We draft our guy next year. He sits behind Kirk, and then we move forward from there. But if we're 4-2 or we're 3-3 or whatever, you say we're gonna let it fly, because at that point then you are almost in a complete rebuild, because you're probably not going to win the division. Depending on your games left and who you played, whatever, you'd still have a chance. Obviously, there's a lot of games at that point left, but I think there's a lot of intangibles that you could look at, just saying, realistically, are we built to win now, or are we going to just try and restart with the guys that we have? Do we build the team around JJ versus Kirk? Do we build the defense around guys like Blackmon, versus Harrison Smith? Do we just need to restart this thing all over again? And maybe that's what they're doing. That's my prediction. Don't be surprised if we don't see quarterback taken this draft.
Well, there you have it. Some hot takes, some cold takes, and everything in between right here on the Skol Purple podcast from Daniel and myself. And we'll have more on the Vikings picks as they are made or not made, potentially.
We'll just trade back until the draft's over.
That's right. The final 8 picks to the Minnesota Vikings. Here we go. All right. Thanks for joining us, and we'll look forward to bringing you more content here throughout the weekend. And as always, Skol.
Skol Vikes.